What's going on, everybody, and welcome back to the Canadian Football Fanatics YouTube channel. And thank you guys for tuning in to another post-game report. Let's take a nice deep breath, BC Lions fans, as the Lions hang on to win an absolute thriller, 33-30 over the Calgary Stampeders in the Western semifinal from BC Place here tonight. As I said, we are back at it for a BC Lions post-game report. It sure has been a while, folks, and I apologize on our absence, but it is playoff time, so you know that means we are back in action. Coming at you guys for a post-game report for maybe about 30, 40 minutes. As we know how usually that turns out, it ends up turning into an hour. I am live here from BC Place following tonight's victory. Was able to be in attendance, was able to cover the game. Huge shout out to the Lions once again, Matt Baker, everybody behind the scenes for making that possible. Of course, before we get into today's post-game report, if you guys are enjoying all the content here on the channel, including our previews, our BC Lions stuff, our BCFC stuff, as you guys can see, we're repping here at the stadium. Please be sure to leave a like on today's video, comment down below letting us know how you guys are feeling, and of course, most importantly, subscribe to the channel. When you guys subscribe, hit the notification bell. You guys get notified every time we go live or upload a video just like this one right here. So, I mean, there is quite a bit to talk about after that one, especially a playoff football game. That was fairly entertaining for most of it, if I'm being quite honest. Although we'll save this for a little bit. I know some Lions fans will maybe be a little bit frustrated or maybe be a little bit disappointed and want to see maybe a better victory or a bigger victory. But at the end of the day, folks, they don't ask how, they just ask how many. So that is the bottom line, and that is all that matters. So we're going to get into it for, as I said, about 40-ish minutes. It's 6:30 as of the time of this recording. Just got done with post-game media availabilities, which is awesome. Was able to take in those. Was actually able to ask my first question. So we popped our first question during a media availability to Coach Buck Pierce. And now we're going to record this probably till about 7:30-ish. We'll get myself some dinner, and then we will hop back on a ferry and head home to the island. Just to maybe take you guys to a peek behind the curtain. We were up in the press box. We were actually, I guess, in the meal room of the press box. We'll take you guys out. I'll show you guys a quick glimpse of the field. Actually, it is the field after dark. As you guys can see, things are shutting down behind me. Hopefully you guys can see that. But we are coming at you guys, as I mentioned, live from BC Place for a post-game report. You guys should be aware of how the post-game reports here work on the Canadian Football Fanatics. We'll chat throughout the game, kind of give you guys our takeaways, our standouts, maybe some things that the Lions need to be concerned about or work on. I shouldn't say concerned about, as they have another opportunity to correct some things, get better at, and ultimately continue to stay 1-0 and advance week by week. So let's get into it, folks. This one wasn't a pretty one by any means. But at the end of the day, as I mentioned, they don't ask how, they just ask how many. If we're being honest, I think for a majority of this game, for sure the second half, the Calgary Stampeders, for the most part, controlled this ball game. And it even looked like late in the fourth quarter, they were going to potentially steal this one as they scored with 30 seconds to go, giving Nathan Rourke just a little bit too much time to march his team into scoring position to get Mr. Automatic Sean Whyte onto the field to knock home that field goal to win it. Lastly, on kind of the ugliness of this victory, I would say is that, I wouldn't say bad teams, because in the playoffs, there's no necessarily bad teams, but good teams find a way to win this ball game. And the BC Lions are clearly a good enough team to find a way late in the fourth quarter. Momentum had completely swung to the Calgary Stampeders, and they get 33 seconds to go on the clock. And Nathan Rourke in the offense leads a scoring drive, gets them into field goal range, and Sean Whyte trots out on the field and bangs it home, puts it through the uprights. BC Lions win 33-30 and advance to the Western Final. So my thoughts. Let's get into it, I guess, from the start, and we'll work our way back. Was able to somewhat put together notes. It's kind of hard, to be honest, when I'm putting together notes. You're watching live. I'm also trying to get some clips and stuff for the vlog for our Instagram feed as well. So let's start from start and work our way back. So, and apologies, folks, if you guys do see or kind of hear me a little bit flustered. I am in a busy working area, I guess, and people are kind of coming and going as the building gets shut down. So everybody that is watching right now, say hi to the Canadian football fanatics as we are behind the scenes of a vlog. Or I guess I shouldn't say a vlog, but we're going to put together kind of like a mini vlog, I guess you could say. So BC was able to get out to a fast start, and that was one of my keys in this one. Take advantage of the atmosphere. We're hoping for 30K to be in attendance. It actually turned out, I believe, it was just under that. I think 26.3 is what I heard up in the press box, official attendance. But the Lions were, and probably should start here. Special teams was a huge key in this victory here tonight for the BC Lions. The saying goes that special teams is a third of the football game. Well, that proved huge tonight for the BC Lions. That, Seven McGee starts off the game with a massive return, getting the BC Lions basically right into field goal range as the game started. Unfortunately for the Lions, they were unable to get any closer, get into touchdown scoring position as I want to say the return set them up inside of the Calgary Stampeders 30-yard line. Unfortunately for them, they're unable to pick up a first down, and Whitey ends up trotting out to kick a field goal to put the Lions on the board after their first drive, which is obviously a positive. But considering the atmosphere, the time in the game, you definitely would have liked to see them start a little bit faster and be able to punch it in with a touchdown to really grab hold of momentum there early on. So I thought throughout the first half, the Lions offense, sputtered at points. I thought Nathan Rourke, although it was very interesting to, I believe, hear that Nathan Rourke going into the half was 75% as a passer, and ultimately didn't really get to get much going. I know off the top of my head, I thought he potentially maybe even missed a touchdown there early on to Aiden Eberhardt. Definitely have to go back and look, because hindsight's obviously 2020 when you look at a replay opposed to live speed. Maybe it wasn't there how I necessarily saw it, but I thought early on Rourke potentially missed, or I shouldn't say missed. He passed up on an opportunity to go to Aiden Eberhardt that could have possibly been a touchdown. That being said, though, Lions are able to do their thing, get on the board there early on to kind of take hold of that momentum early on, 3-0. So after that, I mean, it was a majority. It was tough sledding for the Lions, if I'm being honest. Offensively, at points they kind of started to put things together, but it was a majority of this game was tough sledding offensively. I know 33 points. You think, Cole, wow, tough sledding. I'd take that. I'd sign up for 33 points to be a bad day at the office per se. But I think that goes to show how talented this Lions group is, not only but also just how they're able to overcome a little bit of adversity. Not the best game. I know I kind of said it in the preview, right? Of maybe saving, and obviously in games like this, right? It's like, I'm not saying to save a Nathan Rourke performance. If we needed to break glass in case of emergency, by all means do so. But in this one, didn't necessarily have to break glass in case of emergency. Obviously, Rourke plays hero late in the game, but ultimately not the best game from Nathan Rourke, and I think that is perfectly okay if you're a Lions fan, because you hope that in a Western final he brings out his A game, and it's kind of vintage Rourke, if you will. But overall, Nathan, 16-22, 223 yards, no touchdowns passing, no interceptions thrown. So obviously you don't like to see the 0 in the touchdown category, but at the end of the day, took care of the football, no interceptions, no fumbles lost. Definitely Calgary got after him and was able to put some pressure on him and was able to get some sacks, and definitely I would imagine rattle him a little bit. And maybe I shouldn't say rattle him, but definitely some frustration was going on the BC Lions sideline offensively. You look at Nathan Rourke, who was the leader actually rushing, was very dynamic thanks to that 44-yard rush that really kind of took back momentum there in the fourth quarter. Ultimately, the Lions kind of surrender that away after that electric 44-yard rushing attempt by Nathan Rourke. He ends up finishing with 6 carries for 68 yards on the ground and 1 touchdown as well. So just under 300 total yards and 1 total touchdown. As I said, not a not a banner evening by any means for Nathan Rourke, but at the end of the day, as I said, good teams not only find a way to win, good players find a way to win. And he arguably made the biggest play of the football game, finding Justin McInnes over the middle. But we'll talk about that in a little bit. I think let's get into the defense next. And they did a good job, I think, for the struggles early on from the BC Lions offense. The defense picked up the slack tenfold to start the game. And they did a good job, starting with, let's maybe start with the front and work our way back. Levi Bell, I thought, had a fantastic first half. He really showed up, and maybe you could contribute that to maybe a little bit of the Stampeders paying so much attention to Matthew Betts after the last 6 or 7 weeks. Matthew Betts has been on, quite the heater in the CFL, arguably the hottest player going in. And Levi Bell really took advantage of that, had a sack early on, had multiple other pressures, could have been involved in a half sack, might finish with a sack and a half, although I think that other one's probably going to likely go to Jonah Tavai, but he was all over the field along with other players along that defensive line. And maybe this is a time to talk about the defensive line, and we can start with, the addition of not only Levi Bell for the defensive line, but Anai as well, who got some pressures throughout the game, definitely made his presence felt. You look inside, as I mentioned, with a guy like Jonah Tavai, who was very disruptive once again. I think is a very underrated player in the CFL. His ceiling is still very high. I think he's only still around his floor, and there's still another level or two to get to. Very young player still in the CFL. I think only 24 years old. Jonah Tavai doing a lot of the dirty work inside, a lot of the stuff that maybe goes unseen to the fans, as well as not being shown on the stat sheet. But Jonah Tavai, don't get me wrong, folks, is one of the best defensive players for the Lions this season, and should be an up-and-comer to watch in the CFL in terms of just one of the more talented interior defensive lines. You look as well beside him, Dwayne Hendricks, a guy that was kind of brought in to strengthen this run defense. Did so at times, I think, this season, although tonight maybe wasn't their best performance as a run defense. I think Dwayne Hendricks has kind of lived up to his billing, as well as similar to Jonah Tavai. Hendricks does a lot of his work behind the scenes as well. A lot of dirty work, a lot of stuff that doesn't appear on the stat sheet and kind of pays dividends when you turn on the film that next day and you really see some of that. Him doing his 1/12. And then, as I mentioned, with guys like Levi Bell, Bradley and Nye, that have totally unlocked Matthew Betts and have really been huge spark plugs for Matthew Betts, as well as maybe even a guy like Hayden Harris, BC Lions second round draft pick from this past draft. Obviously, the Lions lose their first round pick with all the salary cap issues, as well as the trade to Calgary involving Vernon Adams Jr. But getting a guy like Hayden Harris, getting a guy like Bell and Nye to replace Teray and Tuhema, who really were unheard from to start the season, and you could argue were huge reasons why the Lions were struggling defensively. But the defensive line, I think, is a great conversation to have, and kind of my thoughts on that one. To go back into the secondary now, let's talk about the man himself. I was able to go down and sit on his media availability. Robert Carter. What doesn't that man do on the football field? He has been everywhere this season. For my money, I think should have been the West representative for most outstanding rookie this season. Obviously, the Winnipeg Blue Bombers returner, Laval, I believe his name seems to be escaping me right now, but I believe it's Laval, who, for my money, anytime I tune into a Winnipeg Blue Bombers game, he's making plays special teams wise in the return game, setting up his team in great field position. The Lions this year, with them being able to set up returns with Seven McGee has kind of predominantly been the return guy after Jermaine Jackson kind of has been basically turned into a healthy scratch. Seven McGee has really provided a spark. He seems to be going through some stuff right now, battling some injuries. Don't know whether it's a cramp or maybe it's a calf strain or some sort of soft tissue issue, but Robert Carter had to, step up at times. I believe during this kickoff specifically, they had just straight up kicked to Robert Carter as Seb McGee was out on the field, wanting to keep the ball away from Seb McGee, who had multiple good returns, setting up the lines, not only on the first return of the game, setting up the lines basically right in scoring positions right off the hop. Robert Carter Jr. Interceptions of the year. And now he's chipping in on special teams with arguably the play of the Lions playoffs so far, an absolute game changer, one that just flipped the game right on its head and ultimately did swing momentum back into BC Lions' favor. But the Stampeders, kudos to them. Got to give them a hat tip. They absolutely dragged momentum back into their favor to late in that fourth quarter. But Robert Carter has been fantastic all season long. I thought, like I mentioned, should have been the West representative for Rookie of the Year. 5 interceptions on the season, and 2 of them for touchdowns. Has been a fantastic player. Now he's filling in and stepping up on special teams. Have to give him a little bit of a golf clap. Tip my cap to him for that. And that aspect of special teams today came in huge, as not only the return game, but the Lions were able to force a fumble on a punt return late in the game. I believe it was Anthony Auclair who was the one who punched it out. Kieran Passant. Shout out to my man, Kieran. As you guys can see, wearing the BCFC CGFL merch. Our guy, Kieran Passant, fellow CGFL alumni, West Shore Rebels receiver, was able to jump on that football. And you could see from up in the press box, we were actually in a fantastic view as it was in the near side of the field to us. Kieran Persson, I think, got those big eyes that maybe I could score a playoff touchdown. He wanted to pick that thing up and try to take it back into the end zone, but there was a Stampeders player around, tackled him pretty much simultaneously as he picked up the football. And from that point on, the Lions, to kind of get back into things a little bit more defensively, I guess you could say, I want to talk about this guy for a second. He has been absolutely dynamic in every sense of the word since stepping into the starting lineup for Christophe Boyu. Jackson Finley, darn near 5 games played, 5 interceptions had. Of course, it is now 5 games played and 4 interceptions had. He was oh so close to making it 5 for 5 since being, put into the starting lineup due to injury. He has been very active around the football, not only with the interception numbers and having interception in 4 of his 5 games now, but he is around the football not only on defense, special teams. He recorded a couple tackles here tonight. He's breaking up passes. He's in tight coverage. He's, their Mike Benavidez is not scared to include him in blitzing, include him in some disguising coverage, trying to, disguise your coverage late. You have Jackson Finley down around the box. You roll him out to that deep safety middle of the field spot, kind of pre-snap or kind of, as the quarterback's kind of, his cadence is going on. Jackson Finley has been a very fantastic player for the Lions in year one, not only with those gaudy interceptions and stuff like that. He's been a very active player all around the football, as well as on special teams, still playing a role on special teams and doing his 1/12th. And is going to be a fantastic player to keep an eye on for BC Lions fans for years to come, as he is only a rookie, and you would still think he has another 2-3 levels to get to if you're Jackson Finley. So very excited to see what Jackson Finley is able to flourish into as a professional football player, and definitely hope that it's going to be in the orange and black for a long time. So defensively, I mean, is there any other thoughts defensively? Maybe you should definitely talk about Matthew Betts for a second, as he was able to get another sack. Showed flashes at times for sure. Multiple pressures that Vernon Adams Jr. definitely felt. The play at the end of the half, where this game is completely, that was the TSN turning point, arguably. Completely different game. The Calgary Stampeders have the ball with about 13 or so seconds to go. Time's ticking down in the half. From up in the press box, it was understood that this was going to be a shot to the end zone or an incompletion and trot out the field goal unit. Ultimately, Matthew Betts is able to kind of somewhat flash in the face of Vernon Adams Jr. I think kind of spook him a little bit. He ends up trying to evade the pressure by Matthew Betts and Vernon Adams Jr., whether it was just things were happening so fast. He's trying to extend the play, realizes, I think, that the time is starting to tick down, tries to throw it away, or at least that was what he mentioned in the post-game media availability, that at the time he was trying to throw it away, but then kind of realized last second that, oh man, this might be too late. Ultimately, Vernon Adams Jr. goes to throw it away. It's too late because the ball was not the most catchable of footballs. It ends up kind of being more like a 50-50 ball with Tevin Jones and the BC Lions defender that was in the area. The ball kind of gets tipped up in the air. Tevin Jones is able to catch the ball, but as he does that, Deontay Williams comes in, holds him up for maybe a second or two, and then the half runs out, and the Stampeders are unable to put up any points to end the half. And as you can see by the final score, the Lions coming away with a 3-point victory. If the Stampeders were able to have that 3 points on the board, this is a completely different ball game by the end of this one. And ultimately, the Stampeders could have came away with a victory just off that end of half situation right there. And that's why coaches always preach about the situational side of football and how important it is to continue to, preach those and to continue to harp on those type of situations from your team. So the first half was, it was a tough one. I think, to be honest, it was a pretty boring one, if we're being quite honest. I think that's probably the right word to say. I believe it was 10-7, if I'm not mistaken. It should have been 10-10 at the half. Excuse me. It was, yeah, at half for the BC Lions, as I mentioned, should have been 10-10. What else could we talk about in the first half? I mean, as I said, it was tough. It was tough sledding. After the first quarter, both teams had combined for a grand total, drum roll please, 4 total first downs in the first quarter, and both teams had their fair share of possessions in that first quarter. I want to say there was maybe 3 or 4 possessions each, so a total of maybe 8 or 9 possessions in that first quarter alone, and each team walked away with a combined 4 total first downs. So that was a half that was greatly run by defensive football, and some adjustments had to be made. Excuse me. Adjustments had to be made by either club going into half. Of course, we did hear quite the interesting situation that went on going into the locker room. We believe that a situation went down between Matthew Betts and, we believe, Christophe Fortin. Some sort of possibly some hands or punches being thrown, or some sort of incident went on as the teams went into the locker room. As obviously anybody that is aware, in BC Place, both teams have to come out of the same tunnel or the same end zone, so can kind of get tight down there. Can definitely get hot, and you could feel that intensity pregame. As I mentioned, I actually tweeted this out. I believe I put it on our Instagram account as well, that as Calgary's coming out on the field, there's some jawing going on back and forth. Both teams kind of meeting somewhat at midfield, although it wasn't both teams. It was kind of a few players from each team. Some jawing going back and forth, and that jawing kind of continued throughout warm-ups. You could definitely feel that playoff intensity atmosphere out here on the field from both clubs, and they could definitely feel and sense the urgency that was in the air. So let's get into the second half here, folks, as we're about 24 minutes in, wanting to get out of here maybe in about 25 minutes or so. So the Lions were able to, once again, kind of set the tone, not only for the start of the game, but in the second half, as they came out on defense. And the Stampeders came out on offense first, taking possession of the football to start the third quarter. And the Lions come out like gangbusters. And I should say Micah Awe comes out with his hair on fire. He ends up taking down Vernon Adams Jr. for a sack on the very first play from scrimmage to start the second half. I want to go check the BC Lions sack numbers, as both clubs were actually very successful. And actually, wow, it's crazy to think that the Stampeders only got home 3 times. The Lions outdid them by 1 with 4. But it felt like the Stampeders had quite a bit of pressure on Nathan Rourke, and that's maybe we'll talk about here after, throughout most of the game, if not for a majority of that second half at least. So let's get into it, I guess, from a offensive side of things, as the Lions offense kind of woke up, as well as the Stampeders offense started to get things going in their end. That's where most of the points were scored, obviously, in the second half. So as I said, the Lions were able to capitalize off that Mike always sack and basically kind of take hold of momentum there to get into the third quarter. And this is where Nathan Rourke really started to kind of introduce himself and start to kind of leave his mark on this football game, as this was the drive coming out of half where the 44-yard rush, where he was able to take it off the left side of the offensive line, have a lot of green grass, ends up turning up the sideline, looking like he might go all the way. The Calgary Stampeders defender was able to get the angle on him. Nathan Rourke ends up kind of giving him a little bit of the Chris Berman and kind of breaking his ankles a little bit. Ends up just getting tripped up, where I think he would have been able to take that one for another close to a 70-yard rushing touchdown once again. Nathan Rourke was actually asked about that down in the post-game media availability, as I said. The which one was better, the Robert Carter Jr. The little in and out, or Nathan Rourke's? And of course, Robert Carter, the humble guy he was, he mentioned it was Nathan, but this was kind of Nathan Rourke almost putting on display, this is why I'm the MLP, because not only if you take away my passing threat and my passing strengths, I can do it on the ground as well. I can hurt you in that area, and that's what he was able to do right there. He was able to, I believe, maybe 3 or 4 plays later, as the Lions, after that 44-yard rush, get set up in a beautiful field position. They took a couple cracks at the end zone. I believe they picked up a first down, and then ultimately Nathan Rourke ends up punching in for a rushing touchdown a few plays later. Massive touchdown drive, which made it 20-7 for BC early in the third quarter. Kind of looked like they were going to maybe put their foot on Calgary's neck and kind of really let them know that they control things. But massive response drive from Vernon Adams Jr. to lead their team down the field for a touchdown. I believe this was the one that he dropped in the bucket for Philpott. It was. And at this point now was when, we saw in the first half, we saw, Betts get a sack. We saw Bell get a sack. We saw Tavai get a sack. 3 of our 4 sacks probably came in that first half alone. In the second half, man, it felt like Vernon Adams Jr. had an eternity. He was sitting in the bucket all darn day and making multiple plays. And this was one specifically where I don't know for sure, but it kind of felt like Philpott almost ran a deep over from left to right, coming towards our press box side, and Vernon Adams Jr. dropped it right in the bucket. It was a beautiful throw, and Jalen Philpott was able to just dive. It kind of was just out of his reach if he would have kept on his feet or kind of continued to run on his feet. And he kind of lays out just ever so slightly and brings it in for a beautiful touchdown to make it 20-14. And the Stampeders kind of, we're not going anywhere. We're staying right in this football game. And ultimately, the Lions kind of say, "Are you sure about that?" Robert Carter, on the very next kickoff after the Stampeders made it 20-14, Robert Carter gets kicked the ball, and the rest is history, folks. So I've already went over this. Robert Carter takes it back for 6. And as I said, what can't Robert Carter do? I was freaking out. I definitely had a couple tweets of, man, Robert Carter is what a dynamic, special player he is, to not only do it on defense, but special teams as well. He's chipping in multiple avenues this season. Has been a very, very nice bright spot for the Lions defense going forward this season. So Robert Carter does that to make it 27-14. And the Lions, from that point, it kind of looked like, okay, this is time now to kind of put your foot on their necks and say, no more, no mas. This is where we start to turn it up and we start to pull away from you guys, not letting you guys back in this one. Ultimately, things kind of get a little bit quiet. I believe the Lions get a stop. I believe the Stamps get a stop. They kind of trade possessions back and forth. I believe I have that correct. I could have been mistaken. That was on the very next possession, but ultimately the Stampeders have possession of the football, and the Lions defense does a great job of getting a stop. Not only do they get a stop, they end up getting a punt deep in the Stampeders territory, which would hopefully result in some favorable field position. And unfortunately for my guy and somebody who we're definitely rooting for in a big way, but Jacob Bond ends up lining up offside, I believe is the call, an encroachment call, I believe, or maybe it was procedure. I can't remember specifically off the top of my head, but even kind of maybe even looked like they got Jacob Bond to jump, and he does. He gets into the neutral zone, and that ultimately rewards Stampeders with a fresh set of downs and kind of gives them new life. And it's like, oh man, we had him. You had him 27-14, a chance to really put a stranglehold in this one and to really not allow them back in this game. Ultimately, that rewards them with a fresh set of downs, as I mentioned. And 4 or 5 plays later, Vernon Adams Jr. is finding Clark Barnes for a touchdown, and it is 27-21. BC still, with the Stampeders refusing to die, refusing to go away. They continue to fight. They continue to show a ton of heart and grit, etc. on the Calgary Stampeders. I honestly can't say enough, and I've been very impressed coming out of this one about the Calgary Stampeders and the effort they put up in this one. 27-21 heading into the fourth quarter, and it's like, oh boy, are we in store for an absolute classic, a CFL playoff classic, and that is what this one lived up to be. We get into the fourth quarter with some back and forth once again. Defenses, really controlling this one, and after that Rourke touchdown that basically started the third quarter, the Lions offense was pretty much non-existent. The Stampeders really started to heat them up, really started to get a lot of pressure. I know the sack numbers, which is crazy to see, didn't maybe speak to that a little bit more with only having 3, but it felt like all night Nathan Rourke was pressured. Hutchinson, Hicks, Brown were multiple times all over Nathan Rourke, and it was Nathan Rourke a large part of the time trying to evade, escape, doing a good job of doing so, at least getting back to the line of scrimmage. Maybe that was happening a couple of times, but I tweeted it. The BC Lions offensive line got whooped. And if they think that's going to be something that can, be close to what am I trying to say here, I guess? If the Lions offensive line thinks that they can get away with it, which obviously they don't, they're competitors. They want to obviously play a better game. But if the Lions think they can get away with something like that versus the Riders next week, I think they're going to be sadly mistaken, and that's one they have to correct, have to get better in. Now, obviously, the Stampeders have arguably one of the better defensive lines in the CFL, especially just based off this season and production-wise with Hicks, with Hutchinson, 20 combined sacks each. You have a guy like Brown, as I mentioned, who was a very disruptive presence in the middle of that defensive line. A guy like Fuller and Malade, who has been injured and hurt and isn't available for them. But I thought they were very effective in the second half. They did a good job of flustering this offense, getting some pressure on them, and is definitely going to be something that the BC Lions offensive line has to correct going into a Western final, because that's going to be one way to get yourselves beat is not protecting your quarterback and not being able to open up run lanes for your running back, whether it's James Butler or Xander Horvath, because neither of them was really able to get going here today. I guess we can kind of get into the final thoughts here from the game, as the Stampeders are really taking control of this one, and kind of where I'm going to frame this one is just the resiliency, the heart, and kind of coming through adversity multiple times this year, and it's showing to pay dividends that the Lions, we've been here before. We've faced adversity and been able to come out on the other side victorious, or we've been able to kind of look some very negative things in the face and turn things around, get better from it, learn from our mistakes. And that was one that the Lions, it's not looking good to get in the fourth quarter here. Stampeders taking control of the football. BA's leading a scoring drive down the field. He finds Clark Barnes to tie the football game, tied the football game 27. Excuse me, that was I'm a little confused on my notes. It's my chicken scratch. Um, when the Stampeders were taking control, I already mentioned the Clark Burns touchdown there a few seconds ago off that penalty from the special teams unit. Barnes was able to set up I believe maybe a skinny post or a seam route that set up the Stampeders into the red zone. And a few plays later, they were able to take advantage of that one with a Vaughn quarterback sneak. He's been very effective as a Stampeders draft pick from this past CFL draft as well. Has been very effective in his short yardage duties. But the Lions surrender a short yardage touchdown, which makes the game 27-27. And you could argue that this was one of the TSN turning points as well, that the Stampeders missed their automatic, and Rene Paredes trots out to kick home the extra point that would have gave them a 1-point lead. And he hits the upright, which leaves 4 points on the scoreboard for the Calgary Stampeders in this 3-point loss, an absolute heartbreaker. But that almost, in a sense, gave the Lions life a little bit. And I think what I have to talk about now is some coaching decisions that hopefully Buck Pierce and the BC Lions are going to be able to learn from. Late in this one, it almost got away from them. Two specific situational things that I thought were a little bit iffy late in that one. Late in the game, Lions have nothing going offensively, and they are on 2nd and 8-9 yards, basically 2nd and long. And Nathan Rourke looks to a medium out route where Keon Hatcher is, and he is in some tight coverage, and the ball ends up being incomplete. As I said, tight coverage, tough spot for Nathan Rourke to kind of thread it in there, and tough spot for Keon Hatcher to try to bring it in with coverage all around him. The Lions end up reviewing it, throwing the challenge flag to review it. And I thought, no, Buck, we might need this timeout late in this game. I thought it was at best some hand fighting, some back and forth. I know maybe there was a little bit of a tug, a little bit of a grab, but I just thought, it's playoff football, fellas. I don't believe that one's, especially the call on the field, I don't think that one's getting overturned. That ends up going to cost them as the play does not get overturned. The Lions lose their timeout, and that was with under 5 minutes to go in the game. And then late in this one, where it's a tie football game, the Lions have possession of the football. You have MOP Nathan Rourke as your quarterback. They run the ball twice, don't pick up a first down, and immediately punt right back to the Stampeders, who walk down the field and kick the field goal, which could have ultimately won the game. Obviously, now that we know that the Lions were able to kick a field goal with 33 seconds left in the game. But this conversation could have been much different by the end of this game if things went the opposite way for the Lions. So Buck Pierce comes out on the right side of these situational things, but ultimately could have been a massive mistake and could have cost the Lions moving on from this one. So let's shut up this late game situation, and then we will get into closing things out. You guys are all good, boys. All good, fellas. There's been a few of you guys. Probably. But let's get into some late game situation from this one. As I said, we're in quite the busy area. There's been a few people walk behind us, which is all good. I love to have a little bit of the audience up here. But the Lions were able to, with 30 seconds to go, they get possession of the ball. They run on first down. They ultimately get quite a decent chunk. They don't get a first down, but they get a good chunk, which gave the confidence to Buck Pierce to say, you know what, let's throw the ball. They pick up another first down to Javon Catoy. They get into even better field position, not quite past midfield yet. And the play of the football game. What an absolute throw and what an absolute catch. But Nathan Rourke drops back with 9 seconds to go. And the play that has been made famous by Justin McInnis over the last 2 years, I believe it's been called a bender route. It's kind of essentially like a deep over, like a deep kind of a seam that bends into the middle. And it's kind of like that throw as a quarterback that you have to put over the middle linebacker, but you have to put underneath the safety. And oh boy, did Nathan Rourke pull that one out of his bag, and it was an absolute dart right to Justin McInnis's chest. He hauls that one in, gets to the ground with about 3 seconds to go, and sets up the game-winning field goal. But oh my goodness, what a play from Nathan Rourke and Justin McInnis to set that one up as Mr. Automatic trots out on the field, and he hits it right in between the uprights to give the Lions that 33-30 victory and to punch their ticket to the Western Final next weekend in Saskatchewan. So, I mean, oh boy, this one had the ups, it had the downs, it had the ups again, it had the downs again. It looked like, oh man, the Lions are going to find a way to lose this one. And ultimately, they pull one out of their hat and they walk away with a victory, moving on to the Western Final for the third year out of 4. And this time, it's time to advance to a Grey Cup. Obviously, Saskatchewan, rightfully so, is not only the favorite, they're obviously hosting the game, so it's not going to be any easy task for the BC Lions next week. But this is one that, you didn't have your A game by any means. So by all means, celebrate this one here tonight. Get into the film room tomorrow. Look at some of those corrections. Look at some of those things that you guys did good. And then it's time to get back into that work week. Get through practice. Handle your day 1. Handle your day 2. Don't look too far ahead. And then come Saturday next week, understand that you have every opportunity to win that game. You guys are just as good as the Saskatchewan Roughriders, and you guys can prove that you guys are the class of the Western Division in 2025. So without further ado, folks, I think that was going to be basically it for our post-game report here tonight, as it's about 42 minutes. It's just after 7 o'clock. I'm going to go get myself a Five Guys burger because that is my go-to. That is my routine after a BC Lions game. Go get my Five Guys, go get on the ferry, and then get back home, although I still have quite a bit of time before I get back home, unfortunately. As I said, it's about 7:15 right now. My ferry leave Horseshoe Bay until 10:40, so that means I'm probably not getting in until 1 in the morning. So home by 1:30, kind of the wheels are still spinning, so it's hard to get to sleep right away, and hopefully home by maybe or hopefully in bed, and sleeping by about 2 a.m., something like that. Of course, if you guys are enjoying all this stuff, please be sure to like the video, comment down below, and most importantly, subscribe. You guys will see us this week is going to be very busy, as not only is the Canadian Bowl on Sunday next week, 8 days. It'll be 7 days by the time you guys are listening to this. We will be back next week with a very busy week. We are going to be back with a BC Lions preview with someone to talk about the game from a Riders perspective. We'll be back from a BCFC's perspective, as you guys can see right here, covering the Canadian Bowl featuring the Okanagan Sun and Saskatoon Hilltops. We'll be back with a preview from that side of things as well. And then we'll be back with a post-game report and etc. Some more BCFC coverage as well to end the week next week. So hopefully you guys enjoyed. That was a fantastic one. I am so excited that I was able to be in attendance here and make this one work out. The atmosphere in the playoff game is just second to none. Huge shout out to Amar Doman once again for everything he's done for the Lions this season, for tonight making the atmosphere that it was. And I still think we could have done a better job at selling out and kind of getting more people in the building. And obviously, I know with the World Series and whatnot, that was how things played out. But obviously, as this one being the last home game until likely August, as next year in the World Cup, kicking the Lions kind of out of BC place, until the middle of the season. The Lions will be up in Kelowna. But once again, huge shout out to Matt Baker, everybody behind the scenes at the BC Lions for allowing me to do this all season long. It's been fantastic. Having some media credentials, being able to sit up here in the press box, being able to go down to media availabilities and other opportunities that have come my way have been absolutely awesome. I'm just going to do it for a post-game report here tonight following the BC Lions 33-30 victory over the Calgary Stampeders in this year's Western semifinal. Hope you guys enjoyed, and we'll catch you guys on the next one.